Trigger warning: the following episode contains talks of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, OCD, and other topics that may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another episode. Mikey on mute, your mind's implode. He's coming off mute for you. Feel the vibe, it's something new.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Mikey on Mute. As always, I'm your host Mikey, coming off mute to talk to you about my mental health journey, talk with others about theirs, gain their perspective, learn something new, and keep those conversations going. I appreciate everyone's support here, and I can't believe that we are recording episode 20. That's crazy. So cool to have reached this milestone with you all. We've had some amazing guests on from all over the world. Other than the United States, we've had guests from Canada, a couple guests from Australia, all over the states here, and we have so many more coming up. I'm very excited about the guests that we have coming in the next few weeks, next few months. It's going to be super exciting. What's been so cool is to talk to people from different kinds of shows, whether that's a true crime type show, a comic show, someone that's doing more comedic, reviewing movies, anything. But we always kind of come back to what does mental health mean to them? And it's so refreshing that we're able to have these conversations, especially with other men, but it doesn't matter who, we talk to. What we really want to do is make these conversations less taboo. And I'm so thankful for you joining me in doing that. For episode 20, I wanted to touch base with my listeners. We started this journey talking about my mental health goings and the trials and errors, the ebbs and flows of what I've gone through. If you have not listened, please go back and check out episodes 1 through 12, which will give you kind of an overview of my mental health journey. Very broad, but I go into a few different stories and really had a great time talking about it. And I continue to urge others to talk about theirs, which is why I bring guests on. But I wanted to check back in with everybody because it's been a little bit since it's just been the listener and I. So I wanted to sit in, check in with you guys. Hope you're doing well. How are you feeling? And really give you an update on me and what's going on with me. For episode 20, I wanted to do something a little bit different. But before we get into that, just a general life check-in with you all. I'm doing pretty good. I'm in a good place mentally. I've been doing a lot of work through counseling and therapy and working with myself, with my wife, and just others in general. And I feel like I'm in a pretty good place with some goals set. Medication seems to be in a good spot, all of that, but I haven't really sat down and just talked to you guys for a minute, and it's been some ups and downs. I thought I was going to get a different type of job. I had an interview that did not proceed to the next step, which normally would be very upsetting. What I can take from that is there was an opportunity for me to, hone my interview skills, test them out, dust them off. It's been a little bit since I've interviewed from somewhere, and just thankful for the opportunity to be able to at least be a part of that conversation. And the right opportunity will come into play as it will. So getting more into episode 20 and what I wanted to do for this milestone episode. A few weeks ago, I was cleaning through or organizing part of the bedroom, and I found my binder that was given to me when I was in partial hospitalization last summer. I went for 7 weeks of partial hospitalization. You can go back and listen to that episode, but it allowed me to check into an anxiety and OCD program give myself a little bit of a reset on the tools and direction I was going with a lot of things. And I thought it would be really cool to kind of go back, see what was in the binder, check in where I was at that point versus where I am now. And I wanted you guys to be along for that ride. So again, appreciate everything you're doing. And so we are going back to the binder in episode 20. And I want to invite you to be in my shoes here and sit and understand where I was last summer versus where I am now. And I think this will be a great way for us to connect a little bit deeper. First and foremost, what I want to express is there's a lot in this binder. We're not going to go through everything in it. I went for 7 weeks, and so there's a lot of information out there. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor, but I went through this program and I feel really good about what it did for me and want to share that with you. One of the first things I came across that I was not used to or aware of, but others were, is what's called a feelings wheel or feelings or emotions wheel. And it's on the back of my binder here, but basically it gives you the idea of like, okay, here's a wheel full of different emotions and feelings, wide range. It goes from, dread and horror and hostile over to hurt and neglected, confused, over, down to affectionate, romantic, enthralled, content, happy, cheerful, and all over the place. What this allowed us to do was to put a name to what's going on. All too often, when someone asks us how we're doing, we say, I'm fine. I'm doing all right. I'm okay. And what that's doing is kind of giving a blanket statement. It's not putting a name to the emotion. And if it's one thing I've learned through therapy, is that naming emotions is a helpful tool. It helps us understand that it's a feeling, not a fact. It helps us understand that it's not who we are, but what we're going through, and can allow you to really narrow down what you need to work on specifically. If you tell me you're fine, that could mean a lot of things. But if you tell me, Mike, I'm feeling some disappointment right now. Okay, well, let's dive into that and dig through more. So really thought it was cool. It comes in this colorful wheel. There's a whole bunch of variations of it, but I guess looking at it now, what would be my check-in here? Let's see. Well, I am feeling enthusiastic. I was excited to share this binder and this episode with everybody. I'm feeling, excited about it being episode 20. And I guess feeling a little bit nervous. Diving back into this is going to bring up some emotions and some memories and things like that. So there is a little bit of that. I'm not going to lie. So actually, I'm feeling quite a few different things on this wheel, which is normal. It really is. Our emotions are valid and they change drastically sometimes, but they change on a regular throughout the day, throughout the minute. And it's good to be able to put a name to that. And that, like I said, is very powerful. I want to open up the binder now and kind of go through what it was. Front page here has the schedule, so that gave me the idea of direction of where I'm supposed to go each day, whether it was exposure therapy or art therapy, CBT skills, weekend planning, things like that. So opening up the binder, again, I have a lot of stuff in here. We're not going to go through it all, but I want to kind of walk you through the start of the day. When we got there, one of the first things we did was fill out this. And this is a sheet of what we're grateful for. Each day we had to fill out 3 things that we're grateful for. And again, that allowed us to sit down and think and not give that blanket statement of everything's fine. No, give me some specific examples of what you're thankful for. And it was really interesting. I looked back at the first couple days and what I wrote, what I was grateful for. My family, a place to live, waking up today. Those were my 3. Those were the first 3 I wrote down for gratefuls. My family, I am grateful. I'm grateful for their support. I was grateful for my fiance at the time, my wife now. her idea of I should look into partial hospitalization and what it could do for me. Very grateful for a place to live. There's been a lot of points in my life where I was not sure if I was going to be able to stay where I am. And so I'm very thankful to be able to lay my head down each night and wake up. And that brings me to waking up today. There was a point, if you listen to the old episodes, you know, there was a point where I did not want to be in this life anymore. And so feeling grateful to wake up each day is a refreshing change from that. These gratefuls haven't really changed from then till now. I'm still very grateful for all of it. It is interesting to see the things that they go, because once if you do it once, okay, that's fine. Doing it 5 days a week, for weeks on end, you start to really get creative with what you're grateful for. Grateful for hugs from my sons, for loud music. Gotta love loud music. I listen to a lot of alternative rock. I listen to some, show tunes and musicals, top 40, all over the place. 90s hip hop. If the lyrics speak to me, I listen to it, and I listen to it loud typically. Thankful for hoodies. I love a good hoodie. My Australian friends call them a jumper. That's one of my new Australian words I learned. So I'm thankful for mac and cheese, comfort food. Thankful for, chocolate, fresh, cold water. I love some cold water and just taking a minute to enjoy that. Thankful for dinner with friends and fidget toys. Thankful for podcasts and video games, watching storms. And it's just really interesting to go through and look at all of these. And some of them I can look at what I was grateful for, and it's tied to what we did the day before, brings back memories. I think it just really is helpful to take that minute to understand what you're grateful for. Maybe this is something you can try, writing down what you're grateful for. It doesn't have to be 3 things. Start with 1 or start with 2, but give a little consistency to it. Maybe once a morning or once at night. Just what are you grateful for that day? And it gives you some insight that there are good things in this world. There's positivity, and you should be happy for it. After we went through the gratefuls and how we're feeling on the feelings wheel, then we talked about our anxiety and depression on, a rating scale, if you will. And most rating scales are 1 to 10, 1 to 5. You see a lot of 5-star things out there now. Quick, plug of my own. If you can do a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it super helps our algorithm. I really appreciate it. But these scales are a 0 to 7. And that caught me off guard, and it was kind of strange, 0 to 7. But I think it allows for some flexibility. Again, just like everything else, our anxiety and depression, it can fluctuate. It's ebbs and flows and differ depending on what's going on currently. So it was pretty neat to be able to do this check-in twice a day, once at the beginning of the day and once at the end of the day. I want to kind of go through what that scale looks like, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more. 0 to 3 are more in that green section if we're looking at it like a stoplight. So low anxiety, low urge to, ritualize. Again, this was an anxiety and OCD program, so there's a little bit of crossover. Maybe not everything applies to you, but 0, calm, no anxiety, no urge to ritualize at all. We're golden, right? But 1, my anxiety bothers me. I don't want to do the thing that makes me anxious, but I know it's going to be easier than I think. 2, anxiety is bothersome, yet manageable. A little harder to resist the urges, but I can do it. Yeah, that makes sense to me. 3, difficult to resist urges. I wish I didn't have to do it, but I can do it. I'll be glad when it's over, but I can do it. Those are our green, 0 to 3. We're kind of in that. Everything's pretty good. It's bothersome, but it's manageable. As we move into 4 and 5, that's more of our yellow warning sign. Some flags are coming up here. 4 is my anxiety is challenging. I'm unsure if I'm able to resist ritualization. It's very hard to resist the urges. 5 is a medium anxiety. It's challenging. It's extremely hard to resist the urges of what's happening. 6 and 7 are going to be that red, alarm bells going off, something bad is happening, high anxiety. So 6 is a near panic. You are very close to a full panic attack. Things are going very bad. And a 7 is you are in that panic attack. You have a fear of dying. Your anxiety has now driven you to the top where it cannot go any higher. And we use this rating to let our counselors know at the time where we're at, if we needed to work on something specifically, or if it was going to be a rough day where we needed to change things up. I'd say right now, if I had to check in, my anxiety is at about that 3, where, low anxiety, difficult to resist urges, wish I didn't have to, but I can do it. I had some technical difficulties before recording this, and it really frustrated me, which brought up some anxiety, but I am still in a good place where I can function, I can move forward, the world didn't end. Next, we look at a depression scale, which is still on 0 to 7 in the same kind of format. 0 to 2 is going to be our green. 0, energetic, extremely joyful, happy, optimistic, no depression. That's your golden standard, right? A 1, I'm joyful, I'm happy, I'm optimistic, I have little to no functioning issues, slightly depressed. 2, moderately joyful, upbeat, but a few issues with functioning throughout life, somewhat depressed. Moving to 3 through 5, that's your yellow warning sign flags are coming up. 3, I'm content. I don't have any suicidal or homicidal ideation, but I do have some low functioning problems. I am noticeably depressed. 4, I'm mildly depressed. Passing thoughts of suicide or homicide. Some difficulty functioning. I'm quite depressed. 5, moderately depressed. Possible thoughts of suicide and homicide. Should be occasionally monitored. And difficulty functioning. Depression is nearly unmanageable. And that's key right there. It's unmanageable or nearly unmanageable. We move into 6 or 7, which are our red. Bad things. We are at the end of the rope. 6 is severely depressed, somewhat suicidal or homicidal, unable to function. I am extremely depressed here. 7, suicidal and homicidal for sure. Unable to function at all, continually to be monitored is what's going to be likely. This is the worst state of depression. If I had to check in where I am right now, say I got that 2, moderately joyful, upbeat, few issues with daily functioning, so somewhat depressed, but still in that green, so we're good. And this allowed us, like I said, to check in about where we were, if we needed some different kind of help that day, things like that. So after our anxiety and depression scales, we wanted to see, what we were going to be, how we were handling life, I guess is the way to put it. So we were tracking what's called bands. And bands, according to the binder here, are problem behaviors or compulsions we want to monitor, track, or reduce. Bands can be tracked in a band book. It's important to track both submits and resists for each band. A submit is when you engage in the problem behavior, while a resist is when you had the thought or urge to engage in the behavior, but chose not to. I think this came more from the OCD side of the program, but it allowed us to look and go, okay, well, what are some of our problem behaviors? Maybe it's avoidance. Say, going up to that person and talking to them gives me anxiety. So in order to avoid that, I'm going to walk away, not be a part of that, and that will help my anxiety go down, but it doesn't get me anywhere. I'm still anxious about that, and I didn't get to talk to that person. So if you avoid it, if you do go through that, that's a submit. I submitted to that ban or that behavior. Or if you're looking at the resist side, hey, this gives me anxiety. I notice I want to resist, but I still went up and talked to them. The world didn't end, and I'm still good. And you resisted that behavior. You recognized it, and you still went through with it. A moment to be proud of. And this was never to be, wins versus losses. The goal is to reduce how many times you submit to the behavior, but it was never a mark about a success or not. It was more so kind of giving yourself an idea of how to be aware of those behaviors, which is ultimately what you want to do. You want to be aware of it, and you want to be able to figure out how you can reduce it, how you can help yourself. As I flipped through, like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here that we won't cover. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here for ages. Going through it, I wanted to kind of just touch base on the things that were the main part of my days. And going to partial hospitalization this time introduced me to a whole new aspect of therapy called exposure therapy. Now, exposure therapy, to give you an idea, is more so you purposely put yourself in the positions that you know will cause anxiety, stress, OCD to kick up, or your depression. You know that these are going to be triggers for you, and yet you purposely put yourself there. That way you can record it, see kind of what scale, what part of that scale of 0 to 7 your anxiety spikes at. And ultimately, you want to see how long it takes you to get to 50% of that. So, for example, if you put yourself in an exposure such as, I deal with a lot of self-compassion issues. So mine, writing and listening to my self-compassion letter put me at a 4 on the anxiety scale. Just the idea of writing it or reading it put me at that 4. And then I wanted to see how long it would take me to get to that 2. And it kind of started off where maybe it would take me over 10 minutes. And then now, closer to the end of the program, it took me 5 or 4 minutes, 3 minutes. But basically what you're doing is you want to feel that anxiety. You want to feel that stress and sit with it. Sit with the uncomfortable, which is, it sucks. It does. It's really hard. But sitting with that uncomfortable, understanding that it's not the end of the world, that you're not going to die, you're not going to perish. That's kind of the point of this. And eventually the idea is the more you expose yourself to it, the quicker you reduce that anxiety, or maybe your number of how bad it spikes goes down. Either way, eventually you see a reduction in that, which helps you be able to be in those situations on a more regular basis with less anxiety or less time being in that full anxiety. There were also different exposures that were called intraceptives, which were basically put yourself into a panic attack, holding breath, breathing through a straw, putting your head between your legs, spinning in a circle for 30 seconds. There are different ones out there, but basically these were physical exposures to put your body into fight or flight. And what it was meant to do was to expose you to that so that you could get used to when you are feeling in that panic or fight or flight, that's not the end of the world. That your body can understand that it's not going to be the time that you're done and dying or anything like that just because you're feeling this. And it's supposed to help build that tolerance up in you. Again, you kind of look at how long it takes you to go from that, down to 50%. So even if you were to do an odd number like a 5, like, I held my breath for 45 seconds and it put me at this 5. Okay, well, let's look at how long did it take you to get to a 3. You don't have to necessarily wait for it to be a 2. Kind of just that rough 50%. And go over and over. And so this is my first time with exposure therapy. There are a lot of different types of exposures out there, depending on what mental health illness you're battling with, or the situation or the trigger. Could be for PTSD, OCD. There are so many different ones out there. So please do some research on exposure therapy. It can really be helpful to get past the things that are driving up your anxiety. And that could be physically doing something. It could be mentally thinking about something, looking at a picture or image. There's a lot of different ways out there to expose yourself. and it helps you understand that the world's not going to end. It's scary and it sucks. You're purposely putting yourself in positions where you face things that drive your anxiety high. But I'm telling you that it is worth it. It is worth it to lower your body's response to that. After we talked about exposures, we focused a lot on respiratory control. Respiratory control is a technique that has been found to be effective in managing the physical and cognitive symptoms of anxiety. Managing your anxiety is important because as your anxiety increases, your ability to think clearly decreases, and consequently, your thoughts become distorted. In addition, physical sensations associated with the anxiety response distract you and your body from being able to think accurately. When you're able to control these physical sensations, your thinking will remain logical and systematic. Overbreathing, in other words, taking in more oxygen than the body requires, can trigger the physical and cognitive symptoms of anxiety. This creates an imbalance between oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's so interesting when you watch TV or film and you see the whole, stereotypical, if you're having a panic attack, they're always like, breathe deeply, give me that deep breath and all that stuff. And truly, that can actually make your anxiety worse. What you want to do is regulate your breathing to a normal pattern. You want to be able to control that rate of respiration. You want to control the size of the breath and make it more so, similar to what you would be doing. So that way you can go from feeling emotional to thinking a little bit more logically. Because once we start thinking logically, it's easier to battle our anxiety because we're able to break things down. What's a fact? What's not a fact? What's actually happening? Once we can get ourselves away from emotion and more so into that, it's super helpful. So we talk about things like box breathing, which typically is just breathing in and out for the same amount of time. So you're inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4, and then holding your breath or waiting 4 seconds before inhaling again. So just the same amount. It could be 3 seconds, it could be 2 seconds, it could be 5, just whatever works for you. You're trying to regulate that, but it's the same numbers for inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, hold, exhale, hold. I even find this helpful at nighttime when I don't really have the mental capacity to do a full meditation. Just doing some breath work to check myself in and get myself regulated helps my body relax. If I'm feeling on edge and can't sleep, this allows me to regulate and get back to a more so like, okay, I'm more even keeled here. Let's take things, one at a time and go through it. And it can really help ground you. Again, as with everything, different things work for different people. Maybe this works for you. Maybe it doesn't work for you. I'm just trying to kind of give you what was given to me and how it works for me. I find this super helpful even now versus when I started last summer. I still find myself doing this thing. One of the last things in the binder that we're going to look at is early on, probably the first week or so, they gave me a list of things, here, please list your avoidance, your triggers, and your fears, which is a big ask. Like, break down the things that really mess with you. And so I want to read the line items I wrote last summer as far as, please list anything that you avoid due to your anxiety. Well, I avoid certain social gatherings, activities that could be graded or determine status. I avoid being vulnerable or opening up, being around individuals I perceive as better, more manly, better looking. I use a mobile app to avoid talking to people even at a drive-thru. I use delivery options to avoid crowds, lines, and feeling rushed. I was avoiding me time as it may make others feel less important, and avoiding large crowds in general. Some of these are still things I will avoid, but some have gone much better. I look at, certain social gatherings I'm getting better at being around, and it doesn't determine my time or my emotions. Being vulnerable, it's something I work on and opening up through therapy, opening up with my wife. I look at, being around individuals that I perceive as better. I'm working on challenging those thoughts. What is it? Is there evidence there, or am I just making up feelings or anything like that? Avoiding me time, that's kind of gone out the window as far as I'm a big proponent of me time is important, and making sure I do find that time each week to take some time to myself, do something that I enjoy. And it doesn't have to be 100% of the time is spent with another person. Next, they wanted me to list my triggers. Some of the triggers I wrote are being told I'm not good enough, comparing myself, someone bringing up phrases about leaving or ending a relationship or friendship, being asked what's wrong repeatedly, arriving late or showing up to a room where people are already sitting, in a drive-thru if there's cars behind me, being asked to clarify something while I'm talking on the phone, people laughing or happy until I walk in and the conversation seems to stop, or a premature finish to sex. Again, these are just some of the triggers that spiked my anxiety, and some are still there and will be. Some have gotten better. Comparing myself is going to be something I work on forever, but I feel like I'm getting in a better place with that it doesn't determine my overall worth, what other people think. Giving myself more self-compassion and understanding that I decide what my worth is. Being asked what's wrong over and over, not as much trigger anymore as it gives me the opportunity to expand on something or look at maybe I'm not explaining something the same way. I process things differently than other people. And so talking that out is a learning experience and versus a trigger for my anxiety. I'm still going to have some issues, especially we think about like as men, like when we have a premature finish to sex or we feel like we're not providing enough, or we grow up with this idea that you need to have a certain size of something that you can't control. And so those will always kind of be pressures that I put on myself. And I am working on understanding that, even though they're there, that doesn't make them true. That I can feel them, but they're a thought, a feeling. They're not fact. As my wife likes to put it to me, she wouldn't continue to have sex with me if there was something I was doing wrong. And if there's something I can change or improve or anything like that, then we have an adult discussion about it. And it goes both ways. We are humans with weird bodies that do weird things at different times. And so just having that adult discussion and understanding our wants, needs, and how we get to there. The final thing they had me list was my fears. My fears were losing my sons, being alone or having no partner at the time of death, everyone thinking less of me or thinking that everyone's lying to me, failure with parenting, work, relationships, being late places. I fear that everyone will eventually leave me, not performing long or well enough, my fiance leaving me for someone who can do things better than me, my wife now, but my fiance at the time, or drowning or burning in fire. And again, these are going to be fears that live with me. I'm not going to get over the fear of losing my sons or get over the fear of failure, being alone. What I can do is continue to understand, am I catastrophizing things? Am I making things bigger deal than they actually are? Or am I doing a lot of black and white thinking? So those are some triggers and fears that I wrote down. And as I said, I see some improvement. It's not going to be like night and day, but I do enjoy being able to look back and go, okay, those were legitimate fears. I am understanding of that. But at the same time, they're not going to control me. They don't dictate what I do, who I am. And it's good to be able to just kind of ground myself. I'm folding up the binder now here. I just want to kind of say, like, as we went through that, there's a good reason to challenge these thoughts. I think that we are told somewhere in life when you feel something that's what it is, that's fact, that we should listen to our gut. And I get that there's times where that can be true, but also it can be times where it leads us down the wrong path, that we are catastrophizing things. We're making the worst of a situation. Catastrophizing is like, if you lose your wallet, that's going to be an inconvenience. Yeah, you have to, cancel your cards and get new ones. Maybe you lose some cash. You have to get a new driver's license or ID. There's going to be a lot going, but ultimately, you're not going to die from losing your wallet. You're not going to perish from that. And understanding that while it may suck, it's not the end of the world. And really stepping back and giving that level to it, even if you have to say, hey, on that scale of 0 to 7, how much, does this affect my life? You might be surprised how much it actually does. It's been very interesting going through this, and I have a lot of different thoughts and memories about partial hospitalization. There were days that it was super helpful, and I'm very thankful for it. There are other days where I hated being there, hated folks. I didn't want to look at anything to do with it. I didn't want to work on myself. And I think that's just how life goes. There are going to be days where you can accept the things that are helpful to you. You can bring them into your life and let them help you see it a different way. There are going to be days where you're just not going to want to do that. While those are valid, what you need to do is make sure that those days don't outweigh the days that you're open to things. Be open to listening, not asking you to change everything you do, but be open to listening, be open to getting help, and really just be open to making changes, being accountable, and making sure your actions match your words. This has been, like I said, a pretty neat thing to go back and look at. I am thankful for the program I went to. I was able to make some friends, and while I was there, I was able to learn some tools that I keep in my tool belt, my imaginary one here when I'm working on things that help ground me, things I bring into therapy to talk about. And so I definitely think it's an option out there to look into. If you are at a point where you feel yourself slipping and it's not quite at that point of the world is ending and I need to go into, the ER now to stop myself from hurting myself, this is kind of that step in between that can help you. And it, moved to outpatient therapy, which was a little bit step further back. And I just want to say that there's a lot of tools out there. So please make sure you take a time to look into it, to research it all. Take time to look, deeper into each subject that I might have spoke about today. I think it's really, really helpful for us to talk about the times that we struggled, just like we want to talk about times that we succeed. Before I go on some tangents about how this program changed my life and give you all that over and over, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thank you again for the support. It's been great to make the connections with you through email, social media, Instagram specifically, and to really have these conversations. I've learned so much from other people, and I look forward to having so many more conversations, gaining more perspectives. It's been life-changing, and I hear these people tell me what you're doing is making a difference. And it's hard for me to be nice to myself, to hear that and accept it. But at the same time, it's not like one person said it. Multiple people say it. Anyone I talk to tells me how much of a difference it makes. And to me, that's incredible. If I can keep having conversations that are changing the world in a more positive way, that's what I'm going to do. Until next week, this is Mikey going back on mute. Take care, everybody. This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Little Jerk Society. Little Jerk Society is a clothing company fueled by the raw energy of creative rebellion, celebrating those who march to the beat of their own drum. They care deeply about mental health and believe in a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their challenges. Use promo code MikeyOnMute to save 15% on your order at littlejerkclothing.com. Again, that's littlejerkclothing.com. And remember, use promo code MikeyOnMute, all one word, to save yourself 15%. Go off and make a change.